the fear of death is rivaled only by the fear of living.
Mm,
Oh, and like this is where I want to be a champion for like we have hopes and dreams and desires and
yes,
notions about how much better it could be on the other side, and acknowledging
absolutely.
that most of us think that the Almighty is not only fear of public speaking but fear of dying. And I say, you know what? In actuality, we're living small because it does take a bit of a
Yes,
risk to
yes,
apply for the new job or to start your business or to go and try tap dance
absolutely.
lessons or anything that might make us feel uncomfortable.
Welcome to And Then I Did This. Prepare to be inspired as we celebrate the unique journeys of individuals who've had the courage to break free and live life on their own terms. Their lives prove that you truly can be free to live your best and most authentic life. Let's get to it. Welcome to another episode. Today, I have a special guest, Jodi Wellman. She's the founder of 4,000 Mondays, a speaker, author, and assistant instructor at the University of Pennsylvania in the Master of Applied Positive Psychology program. Jodi has a TEDx talk with over 1.3 million views called How Death Can Bring You Back to Life, which happens to be the 14th most watched TEDx talk that was released in 2022 out of almost 16,000. She's also the author of You Only Die Once, How to Make It to the End with No Regrets. So Jodi, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to be chatting with you.
Yes. Where would you like to begin in sharing your journey? Because obviously, we're all about inspiring people to live their most authentic life and not feel conformed to what society has told them they should be doing. So
Mm.
start wherever you are drawn.
Oh, well, thank you for offering that even. And it's funny, my instinct is usually to go right into the topic that I love, which is kind of the way I've moved my life into Memento Mori, cueing us to remember that we must die. But now that you've said that, I think maybe it might be interesting to talk about how I shifted, because I think many of us
Hmm.
like we're in these moments where we might want to change, but we're not sure
Hmm.
how. And that can be intimidating. And so
Absolutely.
I spent 17 years working corporately,
Mm.
and most of them were just amazing. And I don't look back and regret anything, but I'm going to be super honest. The last
Mhm.
few years, I was kind of at my expiration date. Like I wanted something different. I knew I was feeling bored, like I'd reached my limit, and but I had no idea what to do about that.
Right.
And so consequently, I just sort of spun around and wanted something different, but didn't, I wasn't prepared to do anything about it.
Hmm.
And so I had this thing that I remember distinctly working in my office at the time. I remember working at my desk and I was stapling two pages together and my stapler ran out of staples. Okay, well,
Mm.
this is a solvable problem. I can just go get a roll of staples from the
Right.
supply closet. So I get up and I go, and I distinctly remember as I was loading that row of staples into my stapler, I said to myself, I better not be here by the time this row of staples is done. And I
Wow.
snapped the stapler back and I went back to my desk. Like I had a spring in my step. I felt so motivated, like got some kind of like an intention, like a deadline. Okay. Fast forward though, about a year, I'm at my desk. I love your face, by the way. You're with us. You're with me. Here
Oh,
I am
I
working,
am.
and I'm stapling, and my stapler ran out of staples, and I felt like a gut punch. But it was like the worst kind of all because I did it to myself, and so I like downtrodden. I went and I reloaded the stapler again, and I remember
Mm.
again saying, I don't, I better not be here by the time this row is done. And
Wow.
this is going to sound like great. Where's the uplifting part of the story here? I ran out of staples again, and for me it was then this really vivid, visceral way of reminding myself like I'm not doing anything about it. I was
Wow.
hoping to be saved. I was hoping that
Yes.
someone would somehow like headhunt me,
Mm.
and that would have been way easier. But I recognized I needed that to go. It's one thing to have an intention. It's one thing to know
Yes.
you want to make a change, but we also
Absolutely.
need, of course, we need a whole lot of bravery, but we also maybe need, because for me, I didn't know how to do it. I felt stuck.
Right.
I felt like I was afraid of losing my identity, my paycheck, my
Right.
expertise, all the things that made me feel like that was my self worth.
And who you
And I didn't
were.
know what to do.
Right.
So I ended up working with a coach who helped me figure out that at that point it was moving into coaching and leadership development that at that time was right for me. And so I made that
Mm.
change, and then that evolved over time into 4,000 Mondays, which is the real passion that I have, which is talking about
Right.
mortality as a motivator. So yeah, that was
Mm.
my stapler story will never not be with me. That feeling of, oh, we gotta take some action. Do you know what I mean
Yes.
by that? Like you must see that with your
Absolutely.
clients.
Absolutely. I have a different but similar story with a trajectory, but it was like an open-ended, when
Mm.
will my sentence be up? And I remember walking, I was in New York
Oh,
in, in Manhattan, walking from the bathroom back to my office and knowing that the expiration date, as you said, that is such a poignant way to say that my expiration date was past the time. And I just remembered thinking, I know nothing lasts forever, so I won't be
mm.
doing this forever, but when will my sentence be up? And
That's
it
so
was,
riveting.
yeah, that realization that no one's coming to save you. No one's
Mhm.
coming to rescue you from me, you from that situation. So I relate so much, which is probably why I was like on the edge of my seat waiting for that.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
punchline.
sentence.
Oh
I
my
love your
gosh.
line. It
Wow.
feels like that, doesn't it? When we're like, it's sort of the self-imposed sentence, which is really
Yes,
the most uncomfortable part of all. And that's where I think living a life worth living um,
absolutely.
takes courage. And there is a line by Seneca, the old philosopher, around how, like, even to live sometimes does take courage, because to make a change and to chase some of our dreams, even if they're little tiny ones, it
Right.
represents something that's kind of fearful.
Yes, absolutely. That
Yeah,
fear of the unknown and not knowing what's on the other side.
right.
But once you step out of that, then you do have that realization of, who am I without that
Right.
title, without that role,
Yeah,
that company, that identity
yeah,
that we take on that's false. It's not who we are, but that
right.
is how we embrace it typically as humans
Yes.
in those
Yep.
roles.
Right. Yeah, and I find there are a couple of things like the belief we deep down know that the potential of what else is out there is great. And I think
Yes.
we do believe that. It's not that we sit around and think, well, it may not be any better. I mean, some people might think
Right.
that, but it's usually about the promise, like we know what's on the other side of fear. But then
Yes.
it reminds me of the quote that I come back to time and time again personally, because I have to override my default setting, which is to be a
Right.
little chicken. And it is this idea like the fear of death is rivaled only by the fear of living.
Mm.
Oh, you know? And like, this is where I want us to be a champion for like, we have hopes and dreams and desires and
Yes.
notions about how much better it could be on the other side. And acknowledging
Absolutely.
that, you know, most of us think that the Almighty is not only fear of public speaking, but fear of dying. And I say, you know what, in actuality, we're living small because it does take a bit of a
Yes.
risk to
Yes.
apply for the new job or to start your business or to go and try tap dance
Absolutely.
lessons or anything that, might make us feel uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just remember another thing that I had done to shake myself from where I was at was I
Yeah.
wrote down the names of people that I thought were aspirational, and
Ooh.
I wrote, would that person show up, sit in a
Ah,
cubicle, sit in boring, meaningless meetings,
yes.
spend their days doing work that is not inspiring?
Yep.
No. So why am
Yes.
I doing that? If they're not
Oh,
doing that and they're living their life authentically, I can do that too.
oh, that's a really neat exercise. You reminded me that in the world of psychology, it's like this, it's called like psychological distancing. So it's
Mm,
one thing, a usual technique is like imagine your best self. Who would that
right,
be? How would she tap into
right,
this inner courage? And
right.
and that can work. But I think what you've done is taken it to say, I'm going to externalize it. I'm going to
Yes,
imagine Oprah, or I'm going to imagine
yes,
someone else who is just like a total baller. And I'm like, how do
right.
they handle it? It somehow helps take the pressure off it being me and the me I think
Yes,
I'm supposed to be. And that provides a little bit
yes.
more of like a wayfinding sign. I think that that's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
Yeah.
as you know, that the saying that we have to become someone we are not in order
Yeah.
to achieve what we are wanting to achieve. Because
Uh-huh.
if we were that person, we'd already be
Yeah.
doing it.
Well, I love the way you're saying it. And you're reminding me, because for me, all roads lead back to the Grim Reaper, but I promise not in a morbid way. This exercise that that we've all heard of, and we've all done it in kind of maybe in a like a dinner party, but like the
Right.
deathbed regret exercise. But I
Right.
really like for us to stop and take it seriously and stop
Yes.
and say, okay, imagine, I mean, you're lying back. You are, thankfully, you're heavily, medicated, so you're feeling
Right.
pretty good. But you're
Right.
looking back on your life and you're looking at all the medley of the highs and the lows, and admittedly,
Right.
most of us would find ourselves there with feelings of coulda, shoulda, woulda. Like I
Right.
wished I had done this. I wish I took that path. Like the pangs. And these are not
Yes.
regrets, by the way, of things we did. Those are called regrets of commission. And typically those, I mean, those are water under the bridge. We did them and most of us can live
Right.
with it. The part that eats us up inside are the regrets of omission, like those paths
Right.
not taken, the things that we didn't do.
Right.
So that's an exercise to say, okay, like let's get out a, write out a list, bullet point list. It can be big. Like, man, I would really regret that I never did. Get back
Right.
out there and try and find a partner after my divorce. Or I regret that I didn't apply for that big job. Or I'd regret that and it could be tiny little things too, right?
Right.
Like, man, like I regret that I didn't go for more walks after dinner and check out, go to the sunset
Yes.
at the lake or the
Abs-
ocean, or or I regret that I wasn't bolder, or I regret that I wasn't, the kind of person that just, was willing to say yes to some last minute invitations. Like, and
Right.
when we write that list out, here's the power in it.
Right.
I call them pregrets because they're they're
Mm.
they're regrets in the making. They haven't happened yet because we're
Right.
not on our deathbed. Like,
Right.
hallelujah. Why
Absolutely.
not look at that list and say, okay, which one or two is the most? What would it take to take action on that thing today?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, taking a step. I will have those thoughts at times
Mhm.
where even at the end of the day, and I live near the beach, so I'm able to,
Yeah.
within 10 minutes to go take the dog at the end of the day. And I may feel in my head mentally like, oh, I just want to lay down and rest for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I'll think, going to the beach and doing that outdoor fresh
Mhm.
air sun setting experience like that,
Yeah.
that's an experience that
Yeah.
I will miss out on if
Mm.
I go lay down right now, because I can lay down anytime. Like I can rest when I'm dead, as your I think your books and just your philosophy around don't waste your life. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you're talking to someone, by the way, like for me, I am a homebody and I'm an introvert. And so I need to be encouraged to live, right? So I'm
Mhm.
half of this stuff I just write for myself and it happens to apply to a lot of us. And your point, your example is such a good poignant one. It's like we're
Mhm.
faced with choice points
Right.
throughout our day about
Yes.
whether to plug in and feel more alive or not. And I, by the way, am a big advocate of like rest is good. I'm not
Right.
suggesting that we all just
Right.
live exhausting lives that look good on Instagram where we're like
Right.
doing all the classes and going on all the travels and doing all the
Right.
dinners. Like, let's just like calm down for a second,
Right.
catch our breath. But
Exactly.
when given a moment,
Right.
that's a moment where I think what you do is, in my language, is would I regret going or would I regret not going?
Right. Exactly. Because I thought, I was like, it's gonna be in a couple hours, it's gonna be dark outside anyway. I can
Yeah.
still rest. It's not like
Yeah.
I'm not going to get that opportunity to rejuvenate myself. Right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an example of a nudge. And the nudge is about the grander scale that I talk about. It's like, unfortunately, we are temporary and it's not news to anybody.
Right.
But
Right.
based on the research around it, it's called temporal scarcity. It's for those who are
Right.
interested, it's this idea that when we look at anything in our lives as, let's just call it like in the economics where this comes from, if there's an asset that we
Right.
see is rare,
Right.
okay, or there's like a limited time only situation on it,
Right.
we treasure it, we value it, our
Right.
perception of its importance heightens.
Right.
And that is true for life. So
Right.
that's why I am kind of insistent and I'm like doggedly determined to get us to like count how many Mondays we have left. I know that I have
Yeah.
1,819. If I'm lucky. Um, Getting us to really be in touch with the crappy reality that we're finite. I mean, let's just be honest, that is just not good news. But
Right.
can it be a motivator
Right.
to be more intentional? Gosh darn it, for most of us, it is, right?
Right.
Like
Absolutely.
time is ticking. So does it help us to get on with our goals?
Yeah. Absolutely. I know I saw another visual, and I'm sure you've seen this also, where someone has 80 circles and they've
Mm.
circled in the first 40 because
Mm-hmm.
they're 40, and they
Yeah.
have 40 more if they're lucky,
Yeah.
44, to
Mm-hmm.
go.
Mm-hmm.
And it just visually shows you
Mm-hmm.
how
Yeah.
much time is left.
Yes.
And the other thing that I heard once, which really took me back a minute, is
Mm-hmm.
around loved ones or people that are really
Mm-hmm.
important to us, that if we see
Yeah.
the person, maybe we don't live near them, or we see them like twice a year,
Yeah.
depending on how much time, say you've got 20 circles left, and
Yes.
you see that person two times, or that person you care about maybe has
Yeah.
20 years
Yeah.
worth of circles left, and you see them twice, that means you're going to see them maybe 24 more times total.
Totally. I- Isn't it profound?
Right.
And this is the stuff that I feel like it's uncomfortable, and yet it's
Right.
eye-opening, and it can help us to design our days and make better decisions. I'm in that
Yes.
same boat with visiting my dad, who's turning 87. And so he
Wow.
actually is
Yes.
minus 8 circles, minus 10 circles, right? Like
Yeah.
the way the math works. Recognizing and doing this countdown. For many of us, I talk about counting how many Mondays we have left till the end. And, roughly we get 4,000
Right.
Mondays. That's why I named
Wow.
my company that.
Right.
But I find that the life countdown's really profound. Some of us find the career Mondays left even more riveting.
Ooh.
And I remember, I mean, I do this
Wow.
stuff for a living, but I hadn't done my career one in a while. And maybe a few months back, I sat and calculated, and I don't have intentions to fully retire, but whatever it's going to look like for me to be like, I'm going to mostly be unplugged. And when
Right.
I did that math, however, it might have been like 642 Mondays, my jaw
Wow.
dropped, and it made me feel like, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Like I have so much more I want to do, that I want to
Right.
try to, whether it's my workshops or speaking or books, and like, and unfortunately, we need that feeling, that
Yes.
discomfort. And my background is positive psychology. So, admittedly, there is always a part of
Right.
me that feels a little bit guilty by using the scarcity mode,
Right.
because
Right.
we prefer to talk about abundance, and there's lots of
Right.
abundance, and we're
Right.
ultimately,
Right.
it's all in service of
Absolutely.
living more of an abundant life. But
Yes.
we need the poke in the ribs. I need for us to stop and go, okay, how many working Mondays would I have left? And for many of us, what that does is we look at that number and we go, oh, I cannot do that life sentence. Like you said,
Right.
that is a
Right.
sentence that I would rather die before that if I had to work that many more Mondays at this company. And that might
Right.
be the motivator to be like, no, 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 no.
Yes.
Or for some of us, it's that I love what I'm doing and I want to do more of it. And that's not enough. And
Right.
now I need to prioritize of these
Yes.
80 things I keep deferring, and oh, I'll do it one day. No, I have to take it seriously. And now I have to say, with more of a sense of urgency, not frantic urgency, but
Right.
inspired urgency. What
Yes.
are the 5 things I really want to make sure happen in the next little bit? And
I
what would be one thing I could do to
mm,
make that start to happen? It's like
I
recalibrating.
I love the inspired urgency. That's so good, because I don't necessarily look at it as like a scarcity or like, a lack of. I look at it more in
Mm,
intentional
mm,
living, because the two things we don't get back is our time and our energy.
mm.
You can get money
Good
back,
point.
you can get
Yeah.
possessions back, people obviously we can't, we can meet them in the spirit realm, but being intentionally living is
Mm. Hmm.
is what it's
I
all
like the way you put
about.
that. Yeah. Yeah. So this intentional thing, one of the things I notice, especially in workshops, so I might do retreats with groups, or just even if it's a 2-hour workshop with a team,
Right.
and getting people thinking and going, okay, what makes you happy? What makes you feel most alive?
Yes.
And admittedly, I'm often met with a look of a bit of like a deer in headlights, especially for busy working women. Just to
Right.
gender this for a second, and I know it might sound a little bit like I'm, stereotypical, but typically, or people who are in more like caregiving roles, like looking after other people,
Right.
kids, maybe aging parents,
Right.
etc. And there's this idea like, oh, I know what makes my kids happy, or I know what makes
Right.
my loved ones happy, but like, wait, me? Like, wait, I lost touch with what that even is. And that's a very solvable issue. We just have to stop
Yes.
and start to notice and start to catch, like get a list going, whether it's your notes app on your
Absolutely.
phone or a sticky note or a back of a napkin,
Yes.
wherever you want to put it. Just start noticing it, because then what we can do in these moments of our lives, that really our lives are just these like 15-minute increments stitched together to make a day, and then it makes a week and a life.
Right.
It's being intentional that a lot of our time is spoken for if we're
Right.
working, right? Okay,
Right.
you're in a meeting from 1 to 2. Okay, well, that's not necessarily your time. But if you have a little break from 2 to 2:30 before
Right.
your next thing, or you've got Thursday evening that's
Right.
open, what might you be able to do that would delight you? That doesn't have
Yes.
to cost a ton of money necessarily, if money is an
Right.
object, or doesn't need to take a lot of energy or time, like you said, those
Right.
really scarce resources. And for some of us, we just aren't thoughtful about, what would
Right.
be lovely is if I sat outside and read a chapter of a murder mystery book that I never read. All I read are business books, or all I
Right.
read are self-help. I mean, obviously read my self-help book, but but like,
Right.
what if it meant like designing and going, that would make me feel really alive. And it
Right.
doesn't, again, this is not about renting a villa in Tuscany. I mean,
Right.
do that too. But ideally, it's like a
Right.
little micro moment of like you saying,
Exactly.
I'm going to the beach and I'm going to do
Yes.
this walk. And while I'm there, maybe I'm going to listen to a playlist that reminds me of my favorite high school tunes. Like maybe
Yes.
that's another way to elevate your existence for 30 minutes. And then you come back
Absolutely.
and you do the rest of the whirlwind of your evening routine,
Yes.
right? Like
Yeah.
intentional, being really thoughtful. But we
Ab-
we have to clue in first. What are those things that might bring me
Yep.
joy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that's making me remember when before I had started the coaching program in New York at the New York Open
Yeah.
Center, there was an open house. And I rushed on a Friday afternoon, caught a cab. It was like the end of the day, working late on a Friday, like why?
Mm.
But I got there and they were doing the Icebreaker. I got there just as it started. I got paired with one of the founders it was called Coaching for Transformation. And the Icebreaker was, if you could do anything with your life, what would you do and why? And there were no barriers. What would you do and why?
Wow.
And so he asked the question of me, and I couldn't even answer the question. My response was, as tears started to roll down my cheeks, how long do you continue doing something that's sedating your soul? My heart is still racing right now. Ooh, as I say that, because I knew my expiration date was so beyond what the time
Yeah.
was that I was meant to be doing that. So I committed that night to do the coaching
Yes.
program. And it was
Yeah.
a big stepping stone toward owning my life and
Oh,
taking those steps to make something different happen.
yes. Yes.
And it's in
I,
those micro moments. It's in those, tomorrow I'm going to get up a little bit early, or I'm going to, just as you said, like, in the evening, whether it's spend a little time, I'm thinking of, people who wanting to transition into something different. It just takes the
Mhm.
decision
Mhm.
and then mapping out just a little runway ahead of you just to get
Yeah.
started. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, mapping it out. I love that. Isn't it amazing too how visceral that moment was for you, a transformation? You remember running in the middle of that icebreaker.
Yes.
Like these are moments in life that I look at, how they say when you die, your life flashes before your eyes. And there's actual
Yes.
evidence that when we die, there's that part of our brain is activated, the sort of
Right.
as though it would look like you got the highlight reel. And I like to imagine that it's the highlights that flash by our eyes, not the lowlights. And
Right.
then these moments where we are completely capable of creating these moments. These are just choices
Yes.
to no
Absolutely.
longer settle. And I think, to be super honest, I think some of us need to settle a little longer than others in order to really, again, simmer in it and feel the pain to move. But
Right.
I think the issue is that most of us simmer too long and then we're just waterlogged. And like you said, sedated, our souls are sedated.
Yes.
You did like 3 life sentences. I think I did 20. I mean, we've done
Yeah.
it. We paid our time. We paid our debt to society, and now we're out. But these moments where like we get to punctuate our lives with these
Yes.
moments where we say, and then I applied for that program, or
Yes.
and then I registered for the tennis lesson, and that
Yes.
made me feel alive. Or then, like you said, I made a decision to wake up early
Yes.
3 mornings a week so I could go for a jog. Or these
Yes.
are moments that imprint in ourselves because we tend to feel pretty proud of ourselves when we make
Right.
choices. that
Yes,
that are aligned with like, this is the goal, and I'm showing myself that I actually give a care about my
absolutely.
life.
It's
Yeah.
making me think of when I moved from New York the first time. So I lived there twice. And the first
Okay.
time I remember I was so wanting to leave. I mean, I was living in Spanish Harlem, working in Times Square, like the stress level, the subways, the people, the buildings, the concrete jungle. And I remember after graduating from the coaching program, I hired one of my peers to coach me. And I remember sitting on a park bench looking over the Hudson River on a Saturday. And I literally, again, was in that one of those moments, like wanting to leave New York, not sure how I was going to be able to do it, and just financial obligations, and which are some of the barriers that keep people doing what they're doing beyond when they would be doing it. And I remember
Yeah.
I had said to her, well, I'm not sure that I can make what I'm making here if I transition to the West Coast.
Yeah.
And she's just said to me, is that the truth? Or is that a story you're telling yourself? And it stopped me in my tracks. And that
Yeah.
statement can apply to
Yeah.
almost anything,
Yeah.
any,
Beautiful.
right? Any excuse
It's
that we
beautiful.
have, right?
Yep. I like how I think we could explore many paths. That one is the most resonant, I think, for many of us, because it's like, in order to stay safe, because fear and the
Right,
saboteurs take over, it's easier just
right,
not to do the thing that might scare us.
right,
But you're right. Is it true? There are lots of versions of the truth.
right,
And I think that there's promise in that, which is like, you can make more money technically anywhere. And then there's another
right,
pathway, which I think I'd be remiss without bringing up too, because a lot of people yearn for a version of a life, like back to that question that you were asked on that in that
right,
icebreaker. What would you
right,
do?
right.
Many people yearn for a life that is simpler, that
Yes,
may very well involve less income,
yes,
also likely less expenses. But
right.
the real crux of it is a shot at joy. Like,
Yes,
could that simplified life in whatever way, shape, or form, do you think it might make you happy? And
right,
many people are so sure that doing that thing, like, I work with a lot of people are used to who were, how you kind of you just keep getting promoted unless you're a moron, and then all of a sudden
right,
you're like managing people, and you're like,
right,
do I really want to manage people? And then all
right,
of a sudden they're leading people, and that's adding all this stress to their lives, and they're just like, I
right,
used to like it when I was a graphic designer, and I didn't
right,
want to be all the art director and do the whole thing, and now I've got all this stress and pressure, but I like it because the title's cool, and I do like the
right,
dough, and it does look kind of good on LinkedIn, and we get locked into these things versus,
right.
could the simpler life actually, maybe it does mean less money. Maybe it does
Yes,
mean that you're not, but what could that do for you? And then
right,
for some people, and believe me, I'm not in the business of helping people dream small. But if
right,
that's the resident choice, if
right,
that's the thing that might make somebody feel like, but then I could go and I could do pottery class at night and I wouldn't feel so stressed. And I
right,
could, then back to my idea, like, life is too short to not
right.
make these changes because
Ah,
time's ticking. And would we rather get to the end and feel like I led
yes,
a life that I feel like was authentic to me, that I
right,
honored some of these choices rather than I let life happen to me?
right.
Nobody wants the
Absolutely.
feeling
Yeah.
of having, like, we want autonomy. That's one of the
Yes.
major motivators. That's one of the ingredients in psychology. The motivation is like, I made choices. I had
Right.
agency. I made choices that were in line with stuff that I wanted to give a
Right.
try.
Well, the interesting thing about the next step of that story, the end of that was that I literally immediately stopped. Like I had some tears rolling down my cheeks. That stopped immediately.
Mm.
Went back to my apartment,
Mm.
started taking action, proactively reached out, and wound up within 3 weeks, packed and moved to San Diego
Oh my
in a
goodness.
new role, making more money than I was making where I was at. And it was that it wasn't about the money or any of that, so, directly, but more so getting me in
Yeah.
action because
Yes.
I was frozen in place in an unhappy spot when
Yeah.
just taking the shackles off and giving myself permission to
Mission.
take action,
Yeah.
it just put
Oh,
everything in motion.
I
Right.
love that so much. You're reminding me. So I started to share a bit about corporate and my stapler story, and obviously getting out and making a change, right? And
Yes.
then I had another version of it 4 years ago, starting 4,000 Mondays, where I was in the throes of a partnership with a leadership development firm and team and the whole ball of wax and a great
Right.
partner. But this topic of Memento Mori really grabbed hold of me. And I went to school, I went to grad school and I studied it, and it gave me, it literally infused me with more life, which I realize is ironic that the topic of death
Mm,
can technically fill you with more life, but I hope we're kind of
right.
on the wavelength now of like, oh no, but it can really like animate us. And
Yes.
I knew that I needed to make this my thing. And I'm conflict avoidant. Okay. So it was not in my nature to want to go back to my business partner who was
Right.
looking to expand in other ways and
Right.
go and say, I want to go solo. But I
Right.
also knew, back to this whole like practice what you preach, honey bunny, do
Right.
I want to get to the end and feel like, what am I going to settle the rest of my career and life
Right.
for someone else's dream? Even though
Yes.
it was awesome working with them. But like, I was not going to muffle my dream and
Right.
knock the life out of it or
Right.
compromise and find little ways to entertain it. I wanted to live the full version of my life. And so
Yes.
that did require the same kind of like gumption, to have the
Yes.
conversation, which again, I see people. There's a woman I used to coach years ago when I was coaching, and we had a catch up. She said
Mm,
she didn't want to leave her team,
mm,
even though she was unhappy,
right.
because she had a team member working under her. And she said, I would just feel so guilty leaving her because I've just gotten her up to speed and I don't want to leave
Mm,
her alone on this team, which is dysfunctional.
right.
And I understand that. And isn't that a lovely notion? What a good
Right.
character.
Right.
But the question really is, are you
Oh,
really going to live your life and play small
right.
because of someone else that you're just feeling guilty to move on from?
Yeah,
Like when in
absolutely.
reality, like you leaving might be the very thing that actually gets her inspired to either grow and
Ab-
stretch or leave. Maybe she's been dying to leave and she doesn't want to leave
Right.
you. So making these changes and saying, number one,
Absolutely.
like pay attention. Like you had that moment and you had your park bench moment and you had that
Right.
realization. And then like how
Absolutely.
within 3 weeks. And
Yes.
is that like a like three? I
It
mean,
was
we do things
mind
we want to
blowing.
do.
Yes, mind blowing. The universe will rise up to meet us when we commit and are true to our authentic self. Our higher self will kick in. The universe will show up in ways we can never imagine.
Never thought. I love that so much. Yeah, yeah. We just have to fathom first, and
Absolutely.
then summon up the courage. And I think you see this all the time. I'm so curious your observation in this idea that so many of us wait for courage to do the thing,
Yes.
and like your face already, you're like, no, no, no. And then it will not arrive on a platter to escort you to the thing you need to do. Like
Yes.
it grows from the
Yes.
nerves and the butterflies in your stomach and the sweat and
Yes.
the fear. Like that is what courage is made of. And so we have to do the thing first. Try
Yes.
it.
Yeah. There's
Yep.
no one coming to save you. There's no one's coming to save us from any miserable position or role or job or life situation, relationship. Like we have to own our lives, own what we are creating and be willing to face it and take action. The minute you take action, we're creators. The
Yeah.
minute we take action, we are igniting inspiration within
Yes.
ourselves. It can be scary, but it's also energy that's flowing through
Yeah.
us that, if we're not growing, we're dying.
Oh, I love
Which,
that.
and
Yep.
so to stay in action and
Mhm.
and just take a minor step, just that making a decision can be a big step.
Absolutely. I'm a fan of starting a document. Start like, if you want to like take notes on something, I'll go
Right.
open up Word, file, save as, I'll name it something inspiring, and then I've saved it. And I already feel like my goal's in motion because I'm already starting to take notes on it. It's just
Right.
little tiny little steps. You just reminded me, a woman I used to work with in Toronto, her name's Jessica. We were going through at the time merger and acquisition,
Mm.
and it was stressful for people. And she came into work one morning and said, I had an epiphany last night. I decided I want to look back on all this and feel
Mm.
proud of how I handled this transition.
Mm.
And that has stuck with me all these years,
Wow.
the words of Jessica. And I think now about how this is true for life. Do we want to
Mhm.
look back? And it doesn't have to be from the deathbed. I mean, let's just take a
Right.
step away from there for a minute. What about, do I want to feel proud at the end of the year about how
Right.
I handled this big decision in my life that I've been dragging my feet on?
Exactly. Exactly. And to take
Sometimes that's
action,
the
because if
motivator.
we don't take action, the universe will sometimes, it's like I have a friend who's an intuitive healer, and she will say, we'll get whispers. It's
Uh,
time to change. It's time to move on. And when we don't listen, it's like, it's time to move on. It's time to, and if we don't do it proactively, sometimes we'll get booted in the butt and bumped out of whatever that
yes,
situation is to do
yes.
what is next and what we're meant to be doing instead of living
Mhm.
asleep at the wheel.
Right.
Right.
I think sometimes that's the work. Like, we might feel proud that we made the change. And then the goal is like, how do I just shorten? Because change is going to happen again. Like, we're going to make a
Right.
change. Let's just say with many of us, it's career related, right? Go to a
Right.
new organization or start a new company or go and, involved in a new nonprofit, whatever it is.
Right.
Let's just be honest. Like, because we're always changing, it's the nature of life and then death.
Right.
It's not if, it's when we're going to feel the nigglings
Yes.
again about a
Yes.
desire to change something. And
Yes.
my whole goal is just, how do we keep shortening the time it takes for us to make the change next time? So it's more
Yes.
noticing. It's like working with people like you to help, like you help people see when it's a whisper versus when is it actually jabbing you with the edge of its sword, right?
Right.
But
Absolutely.
paying attention sooner.
Yeah. So in kind of a wrap up sense, what advice would you have, given the journey you have experienced? What advice would you have for people who are on the edge, know they need to do something different and just haven't done it?
Yeah. The roads lead back to me about, it's funny as this will sound, like befriending the Grim Reaper. It's a topic we don't want to
Mm,
talk about. I could totally get. And yet, it's only when we start to size the prize and
mm,
recognize how much time we have left, whether it's in life or working,
right,
that we really will sense that urgency about, why am I dilly dallying around? And people who have
right,
had near death experiences, the research is abundantly clear that they emerge, whether because maybe they have a cancer in remission or they
right.
luckily didn't die from the motorcycle accident, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm,
they emerge typically with a clarity that
mm,
I think we can learn from. It's that they now know, oh, that little silly stuff I was sweating over doesn't matter anymore. This is what matters. I'm going back to school to become a librarian, or I'm doing this thing
right.
now because I saw that it's short, and we all have the ability to do that. And so that's just what I want. Is
Yes,
when we're feeling scared, you know what? Nothing trumps the fear of death. Go ahead. You're getting there. Do we
right.
not, like, there's nothing to lose. There is nothing to
Absolutely.
lose in giving it a go.
Absolutely. And everything to lose by not doing it.
Oh,
Yeah.
well said. So well said.
Right. So thank you, Jodi, so much. Hopefully we inspired some people today to be brave and live a life with no regrets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love it. Your stories have already inspired me. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's a wrap on another episode of And Then I Did This, celebrating the lives of those who've walked away from the beaten path to pursue work and a life that nourishes their soul. If you're feeling inspired and ready to explore your own path to freedom, check out youcanbefree.life, where you'll find resources and support to help you break free and live life on your own terms. See you next time.